everybody. How are y'all doing today? Everybody ready for the weekend? Did you all get the announcement that the date for having all your quizzes, all your assignments, everything is October the 2nd. Right now, I'm hoping that we can have the unit quiz done by October the 2nd, but even if we haven't done that yet, let's just go ahead and get everything else completed by October the 2nd, because that unit quiz will be right on the heels of it. Okay? Any questions about that? Okay. So, the individuals who've been worried about a due date, we have one. Okay? Well, we started talking a little bit about cognitive psychology last time. And one of the things I want you to link with cognitive psychology is that it's really, really concerned with the underlying causes of thought processes. Just like we linked Freud with the unconscious, I want you to link underlying thought processes with cognitive, okay? Now, we went through all these, correct? And we got to about right here. Good. Ellis believed that we give ourselves self-destructive thoughts, and these can kind of get on a roll and convince us about a certain issue. He came up with a model. The whole model is called REBT, Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy. But this is the core of it. This is how you do it. It's the ABC model. The A is the activating event. B, your belief about that event. C, the self-defeating emotional and behavioral consequences because of that belief. D, disputing the irrational beliefs. And then E, the new rational effects of your disputing these irrational events or beliefs. When he says irrational, he doesn't mean like bizarre, psychotic. He means self-destructive thoughts, defeating thoughts, self-defeating thoughts. Now, as soon as y'all get through with this, I'm going to show you a little video, and it's an excellent video showing how a therapist would use REBT. Now, I have to admit, the video has two Australian people, so they have a little bit of an accent, and when they talk about uni, they're talking about the university that they are both in, okay? Everybody got this? Okay. I'll go ahead and get this thing going for you.
How can I help you today?
Well, I'm working full-time. I'm a part-time student.
Right.
I've just gotten engaged and I live at home. There's just so much stress in my life. I have everything happening all at once. Just to top it all off, I failed an exam, a really big exam, and I just feel like I can't do anything anymore. I can't do anything right. I've just got so much stress and I feel like such a disappointment, such a failure, and embarrass my family by failing. I just don't know what to do anymore, and I guess I've come here today to tell you, like, I want to leave uni, and I guess that's why I've come here today.
Okay, so it sounds like a whole lot of stuff's on top of you at the moment?
Yeah, just so much, just all
Stressing you out.
piling on, yeah.
So you're working full-time, plus
Part-time study.
part-time study, and then you've got your wedding preparation.
Yeah, just got engaged and wedding's just a month away now, so yeah. So I've just got so much happening. Work is really demanding and yeah, just failed this exam. It's just, yeah, don't know what to do, all too much.
Yeah. So I imagine you've been sweating on this for a while and it's all been swirling around in your head.
It's just been building up and so much pressure with everything, and I'm living at home, so my parents, you know, a lot of pressure, need to do everything right, and yeah, and by failing this I feel like I've just embarrassed them and disappointed them, and I just don't feel like I'm good enough, you know, to go on studying.
Okay. And have they said much to you about failing the exam?
Oh, they haven't said much. I was really scared to tell them actually, because I knew they'd just be so disappointed and just embarrassed by the fact that I did fail.
Okay.
Yeah, I've never failed anything before, and so yeah, it's really hard.
Yeah. So it's new and you don't like it at all?
Not at all, no. And I think leaving uni will just be the way out, just so I don't have to go through it again.
Right, okay. Well, I'm glad you've come to counselling, because it's good for us to get an outsider's opinion when we've got so much on our plate and we're confused as to what to do and our emotions can get in the way. And you just said earlier that a whole lot of stuff's on your plate at the moment. Okay. So I'm glad you've come here. Here at the clinic, we use the ABC model, which is a cognitive behavioural therapy model.
Okay.
So, Marsha, some counsellors have put together a list of beliefs that we often use, and we don't realise that we're using those beliefs, and they tend to be faulty ones.
Okay.
Here's the list here. Have a look through that to see if there are any beliefs that you might be operating on at the moment.
I think number 2.
Okay. Read that one out for me.
That it's necessary to have a high degree of order and certainty in order to be happy and perform well.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier.
Number 4, that it's necessary to be competent and successful in all those things which are attempted.
Yeah, that's an expectation from your family.
Yeah. Possibly number 8, that life should be entirely pleasant and enjoyable, and that any frustration, discomfort or pain would be unbearable.
Yeah. Which one of those stands out the most for you at the moment?
Probably number 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
How would you put that in your own words?
That I need to be successful all the time in everything that I do. Yeah.
And is that different from what's happening in your life at the moment?
Well, failing that exam, I mean, I wasn't successful with that, so yeah, I mean, it just throws out, I guess even number 2, because throws out all the order in my life. I need to have everything, you know, so I need to know what I'm doing, where I'm going, yeah, so.
Okay, so if number 4 is an expectation that your family have and that you have of yourself, how do you measure up next to number 4?
I don't feel like I'm good enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what I'd like to do is put some of those ideas on the board under the ABC, and I'll explain as we go along.
Okay.
Okay. So what do you think the trigger point might be, or the activating event for you at the moment?
I mean, there are a lot of things, but I think obviously failing the exam was the main one.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And the consequence is you thinking of leaving.
Leaving uni, yeah.
All right. And that statement you made earlier about I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
That's the B one. That's the crucial one, and I'll explain it shortly when I get up to the board.
Okay.
All right. Okay. I think I'll put it up there now for you, so we can work through that. So, Marsha, the activating event, which is what you stated earlier.
I failed my exam.
That's right. And the kind of decision that you're thinking about is...
Leaving uni.
That's right, yeah. Okay. So it's important that we consider the jump from here over to here and the kind of thinking that you've been swirling around in your head affects the consequence. And you've mentioned earlier that number 4 seems to fit, and you put that in your own words. What were your words before?
That I'm not good enough.
Yeah, good. It's really important for us to consider that kind of thinking. Okay, Marsha, it's good that we've got those things on the board. And what I'd like to do now is focus, stepping out a bit from your situation and looking at it from another point of view. To me, it sounds like you're doing a whole lot of things really well. Can you list all of the things that you're doing really well?
I'm working. It's a really demanding job, and I'm keeping up with it. So I guess work. Things with my fiance. I mean, we're engaged, so planning the wedding. That's going really well. It's stressful, but it's going well.
And all of your other university subjects?
Yeah, never failed anything before. This is the first one, so I guess all the other subjects,
Yeah. And you're succeeding in all of those things put together.
Yeah.
You're juggling it, and it's a lot on your plate at the moment, but it sounds like you've been able to cope up until this point of the one exam.
Yeah, this one just threw me off balance. Failing,
So, would you describe yourself as successful most of the time?
Yeah, most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's the evidence for that?
Passing all my exams all the time.
Yeah.
I'm just passing my subjects, not just
that's
exams.
right.
Getting that full-time job, it's a great job that I'm doing. Getting married.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, how do all of those successes compare to that belief that I've written on the board for you?
I guess in comparison, I am good enough.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And all the evidence is there. All of the subjects that you've passed in first year and now second year. Your full-time job, that's a success.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, good. Okay. Well, what I'd like to do is get you to write that on the board.
All right.
To dispute that belief.
Okay. Yep.
Would you do that?
All right.
Well done, Marsha. That's a powerful statement. What kind of decision goes along with that?
Staying at uni.
Good. Okay. Write that on the board for us. Great. That's good. Good. Okay. So you've made a bit of a decision there, haven't you?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about it. Does it feel okay?
Yeah. I feel like I should stay.
Okay. Why is that?
I can try again. I mean, everything doesn't have to be 100% all the time.
Good, good.
So, I mean, I could resit the exam.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. And we've talked about all your successes.
Yeah.
So it's harder to believe that top statement that I'm not good enough.
Yeah, I mean, I am good enough compared to all the things that you helped me realise with all the successes that I've had.
That's right.
I am good enough.
Yeah, good. Okay. And so, this idea about staying at uni, tell me
I'll
about that.
stay. I mean, I am good enough, so I'm sure I can give it another go and see how I go from there. I can resit the exam, and I'm sure I'll be fine.
Okay, good. Okay. What I'd like you to do is to keep saying that statement, I am good enough. Say it in front of the mirror 2 or 3 times a day, so that you build up your confidence. Because it's going to take some time to reprogram your computer up here with that kind of positive belief about yourself, rather than carrying around that other belief. And we tend to carry those other beliefs for years and years and years, and so it's going to take a bit of work on your part to deliberately change your thinking and change your belief system.
Okay.
But you've made a great start here today, so congratulations. Well
Thank
done.
you.
All right.
I wonder if it would be better if I did turn off that one and let you talk. Nope. Okay. Now, did y'all get kind of a flavor for how it works? He did a really, really good job of simplifying it. Now, remember Ellis is the one who developed this, and he's the one who said that there are faulty thinking called irrational beliefs. Now, irrational thinking, he had a list on the film of a whole page of irrational thinking. I've just got a couple of things here, and I'm not going to go through his whole list, but I am going to go through a couple of these and kind of give you the idea of where Ellis is coming from. The notion that you must receive love and approval from all significant others to be happy. Okay? I must be married to be happy. Okay? I must have mother and dad's love every minute, or else I'm not a success. I'm a failure. You know, it is amazing how many demands we put on ourselves. We're going to get down to that in just a minute down here. But I'm totally for Alice. Absolutist thinking, 100%. All or nothing. I had a client come in one day, and he kind of fell into his chair, and he said, well, I'm going to have to move. And I said, well, what happened? And he said, all my neighbors hate me. I'm not going to live in a neighborhood where all my neighbors hate me. Okay. I said, how did you find they hated you? Did they give you a petition and say, we all hate you, you need to move? And he said, oh no, nothing like that. And I said, well, obviously you've got an idea somewhere that they all hate you. And he said, I just know. Well, let me see if I can understand this a little bit better. What about the guy or the people that live to the right of you? How do they hate you? How do you get along with them? And he said, well, really, my wife and I get along with them pretty well. We babysit for their kids when they go out, and they babysit for us when we go out. And as couples, we associate and such, and so we get along pretty well. I said, well, it certainly sounds like they detest you. And he said, oh no. He said, all right, that neighbor doesn't hate me. And I said, okay, well, what about the people on the left? And he said, well, it's a single guy, And he said whenever we grilled steaks, he'll come over and he'll put a steak on the grill. And during the football season, he comes over and we drink beer watching the game and curse the referees and cheer on the Hogs, and such. And I said, oh yeah, it sounds like you've got a really, really hate relationship with him. And he said, okay. My 2 next door neighbors don't hate me, but everybody else does. And I said, when you say everybody else, I said, do you mean 95% then of the neighborhood? And he said, no, not 95. And I said, 75%? And he said, maybe not that high. And I said, well, since you've got somebody who lives next to you that likes you on both sides, maybe it's every other neighbor that hates you, 50%. And he said, no. I said, 25%? And he said, probably not. I said, all right, help me to understand, how many neighbors hate you? He said, 1, okay? I said, 1? And he said, yeah, he goes, I got into a fight with them this morning about the garbage can. Now, he went from 100% of his neighbors hating him to 1. Okay? I had to bring it down to reality. And he was absolutely into absolute thinking. Okay? All or nothing. You must be successful all the time or you're a failure. You have to succeed at everything or else you're nothing. Well, you can see the illogical ramifications of that kind of thinking, can't you? Nobody succeeds at everything 100% of the time. You cannot strive to be perfect, because if you strive for perfection, you're setting yourself up for failure. Instead of having perfection as the goal should be to do your very best all the time. Because if you give it your very best, if you've done your very best, then who could ask you to do more? And if you fail, you have done everything you could. But if you set perfection up as your goal, and you don't meet it, and you do that on a regular basis, when you fail, you're going to say, well, there I am, I failed again. And it starts leading to this irrational thinking of, I'm a failure. It can lead to self-esteem problems. It can lead to self-worth problems. Do what? Yeah. And you start putting stuff on you and wearing labels that you have put on yourself that are not true. And like I said, you cannot be perfect in everything 100% of the time. That also goes into making goals. Your goals have to be achievable. You want to set high goals. You don't want to set impossible goals. I'm 5'1", okay? Let's say that I took a leave from the school and I said, I'm going to work out 18 hours a day for 6 months. I'm going to go on the best diet that I've ever been on. I'm going to work out. I'm going to really, really give it my best. And in 6 months, I'm going to slam dunk a basketball on the NBA level, on the NBA height. I couldn't have done that in my prime, because physically it's impossible for me to be able to reach that height and slam dunk it. And so here I put in 6 months, 18 hours a day, incredible diet, done everything that I needed to do to try and achieve an unachievable goal. Do what?
So on trampoline, maybe.
Yeah, a trampoline. But at the end of that, well, I'm a failure. Here I worked 6 months, did everything I was supposed to do, but I didn't make that basket. I couldn't have. It was physically impossible for me. So, you do not have to be successful all the time to be happy and to have self-worth. Ellis says that we incorporate some words in our vocabulary that set us up for failure or set us up for self-esteem problems and too much pressure in our life. These words are words like must, should, ought, need, have to. And he had a name for those words. He said when you are using those kind of words, you are masturbating. Okay? Now, I must be married to be happy. There's a lot of people who are not married that are happy as they can be. I have to have a job as president and CEO of a major corporation to be successful. Not everybody in this world is going to do that. You should really, really make an A in this class so your parents will be proud. Your parents, people need to be proud of who you are, not what you do. You are a human being, not a human doing. Okay? So, these words set you up for pressure in your life and self-esteem problems. And what? And credit? And stress. Yeah, absolutely. And they set you up for having some mental, I don't want to say dysfunction, because it's not as much dysfunction as just some mental challenges and thinking mentally unhealthy. Okay? One has to be thoroughly competent and have a high degree of order and certainty in order to be happy. I must achieve outstandingly well in one or more important respects, or else I am worthless. Can you see the faulty thinking in that? Now, I once had a student come up, and before we got Blackboard and all these other technological things, I gave out paper tests. And what I would do is I would grade the test, and I would give them back to the students, and if the student wanted to correct the test, correct any incorrect answer, I'd give them half credit back. Well, finals were given, grades were out, grades were posted, and I had one of my students come back, and she said, I'd like to correct my test. And I said, well, first of all, grades are posted, and everything's already in. And she goes, no, that's not the problem. And she goes, I want to correct my test because I didn't make perfect on that test, and I'm not satisfied unless I have a perfect paper. I cannot be happy, and my parents cannot be proud unless that last test is going to be perfect. She already had an A in the class. I think she was one of the top scorers in the class. But she came back and she said, I have to correct that test and have it perfect before I can move on. You don't have to be thoroughly competent and have a high degree of order and certainty to be happy. That's extraneous happiness. Your happiness needs to come from inside. Other people must treat me fairly and well, or else they are bad. Well, we all have bad days. And you might have a near and dear friend, and you all get together and they go off on you one day. Does that mean that they're bad because they didn't treat you fairly that day? Are they a bad person? No. But we put that label on other people that we don't know that treats us badly. And we say, okay, since they cut me off from parking space, I guess they're really, really an inconsiderate, horrible person that probably put salt in their mom's coffee or something. I mean, they're not good people. They're basically really bad to the core. Conditions must be favorable or else my life is rotten. It's kind of going along with this. You're not going to have a perfect day every day. Your day is not going to be, you're not going to have a perfect day every day in your life. So that does not mean because you have a bad day, your life is rotten. Now I'm going to tell you, I don't know if you've experienced this or not. We have seasons of life. And sometimes you're going to have a season where it seems like everything in the world is going great for you. Everything is fantastic. And then you'll hit the bottom. You'll slide on down a little bit. And some of these, you'll have some bad things happening. But then it'll come up. That's why I tell a lot of my friends, they say, well, how are you doing today? And I said, I'm riding the wave. I'm trying to enjoy the peaks and hang in there for the valleys. Because conditions are not going to be favorable every day. I have had jobs that I think that the supervisor may have come from the gates of Hades. But I hung in there, and lo and behold, that supervisor got removed, and we had another supervisor that came, that was phenomenal. Okay? So, you hang in there and know it's not rotten, it's just part of life. One has a choice in how they feel. I think we saw that a little bit in the film. Okay? She was going to quit her college career because she felt like a failure because she failed a test. All right? So, after she started looking at all of her successes, she chose then to quit thinking like a failure and start thinking like a winner. It is necessary to be competent and successful in all things attempted. That's another one of those absolutist statements. You have to succeed in everything or else you're a failure. Life should be entirely pleasant and enjoyable, and any frustration, discomfort, or pain will be unbearable. You start telling yourself that, and you'll start getting into self-fulfilling prophecies, and you'll start looking for bad things in your life to validate that thought that life is crappy. You start looking for the good and pleasant things. It'll help you. It'll help you ride the wave when you have some bad days. Most people waste lots of time doing the impossible, trying to change or control the behavior of others. No truer statement was made. The only person thinking that you can change is you. It's your thing. The only person whose choices that you can control are yours. If you sit around and think about how I'm going to change this person, you're wasting time, and the only way that they will change is if they choose to change. You can't make them do anything. I mean, you can throw them down on the floor, twist their arm and break it, and then they'll finally say, okay, I'll do it. But they've chosen still to do it. They still had a choice of not doing it and having more pain, but there was a choice there. Cognitive therapists view humans as they really are. Thinking, feeling, and behaving creatures. And that triangle, thinking, feeling, and behavior, each one of those affects the others. These three aspects of human function are interrelated. They interact with each other, not responding in a desperate way, but functioning simultaneously. So if you think about something, you will feel and act in relation to it. If you change one, it will affect the others. If you change the way you think about something, it will change the way you feel about it, and then it will change the way that you will act in reference. Cognitive view of human nature. Human nature is to think, feel, and act both in your best interest and against your best interests. And so you will feel the way you choose to feel. Well, what are some of the criticisms of cognitive psychology and cognitive therapy? A lot of people say it's not warm and caring enough, especially in therapy. The therapist doesn't give a lot of warm fuzzies. They say that because the therapist will confront irrational thinking, will confront non-productive behaviors, okay? It underestimates the need for free association, examining the past, examining the unconscious processes, and plays down the role of transference. All of these tell you the Freudians do not agree with cognitive psychology. Now we've got humanism. Humanism. Now humanism is really, really new in relation to the others. You know, like, the psychoanalysis was in the 1900s, the behavioral, that 1920s. Humanism came between behavioral and cognitive. It was in about the 1940s. There are two big names in humanism: Carl Rogers, Abraham Maslow. Okay? We're going to talk about Rogers. Maslow is going to come a little bit later in our emotion and motivation chapter. He's one that came up with the hierarchy of needs. 5 postulates of humanistic psychology. Human beings cannot be reduced to components. Well, what approach to psychology does that fly in the face of? How about structuralism? Structuralism, we need to break the consciousness down into different elements, into different units, into different components. And humanistic psychology said, no. Human beings have in them a uniquely human context. One of the things about humanistic psychology, they value the uniqueness of the individual. They very much value the uniqueness of each person. Human consciousness includes an awareness of oneself in the context of other people. In the context of other people. Human beings have choices and responsibilities. Humanistic psychology is very, very big into free will and personal choice and personal responsibility. Human beings are intentional and they seek meaning, value, and creativity. focuses on the present, the here and now. And I want you to think about this for a second. Psychoanalysis concentrated on the past, especially childhood experiences. And so humanism is in the here and now. Psychoanalysis concentrated on trying to find things going on in the past. You talk about the past. They focus on the healthy personality. They want to look and see what is going on right in that person's life and validate it. It focuses on responsibility, on the growth potential. It focuses on free choice. It is a very positive approach in psychology, very positive. It values the uniqueness of the individual. It will focus on the conscious, where the psychoanalysis will focus on the unconscious. Now, I hope you all are seeing where I'm going here, because when we line these two approaches up side by side, they're opposite. They're absolutely opposite. One concentrates on the present, the other one concentrates on the past. One concentrates on what's going right, the other one concentrates on what's going wrong. One focuses on the consciousness, one focuses on the unconscious. And so here we have two approaches that are really, really opposite. It's a holistic approach, and it really, really, really concentrates on human potential, personal responsibility, choices, spirituality, and a thing called self-actualization, where you link the word Freud with the unconscious, and you link the word cognitive with underlying processes, link the word humanism with self-actualization. That's one of those you write down, you circle, you highlight, you underline, you write important by it, and then you put a star. Okay? Self-actualization means becoming everything that you could be. Reaching your fullest potential. I mean, if you want to put it in advertising terms, the Army summed it up real well. Be all you can be. Self-actualization, reaching your fullest potential. Now, when humanism came about, there were two main forces in psychology: behavioral and psychoanalytical. That was basically the only choices that therapists had to choose from if they were going to do therapy. The humanistic approach came out of a philosophical movement. And they were challenging many, many things, like spirituality, in many, many areas. And in doing so, it crept over into psychology. When it hit psychology, it gave the therapist another approach to therapy that wasn't anything like psychoanalysis and wasn't anything like behavioral, and it was brand new, and it was a completely different approach. So they named it the third force. Okay? So humanism is the third force. Another thing that about humanism is they believe researchers should not take the results from a test on an animal and apply it to humans. Okay? This is why the behavioralists and the humanists don't get along. Okay? The humanist says that's disrespectful to humans, that we're above the animals, and just because the animals, can be trained to do this in a certain way in a certain amount of time, that it's disrespectful to say, well, I wonder if humans can do that. See? So, the behavioralists and the humanists don't get along. The psychoanalysts and the humanists are absolutely opposite. They don't get along. The cognitive and the humanist, they don't clash as badly as the others, but they really don't see eye to eye on their approaches. Well, I want to review for a second Freud's view of mankind, his view of human nature, okay? Humans cannot be trusted and have no control over sex or aggression due to repression. Humans cannot be trusted. They have no control over sex or aggression due to repression. Now here's the humanistic view of mankind. Man is basically good. He's trustworthy, rational, constructive. So there you see again, absolute opposite ways to look at the same thing. Here, the psychoanalysts believe that humans can't be trusted, have no control over sex or aggression due to repression. Here, the humanists believe humans are basically good. That basically they're trustworthy, rational, and constructive. That given the circumstances, they'll try to do the best every time. Now, I'd like to dispute that for a second. In here, I know what the other classes I've had, but in here, let's say that you could rob a bank, get $500,000, and in no way you would be caught. They would have no idea who did it. You would never be caught. You would never be suspected. You'd never be punished. How many would rob the bank? We have some honest people. Good. All right. Now, when we say that, we robbed the bank here, this right here, you can see that would be challenged. And in every class, I have people that say they would do it. They would do it. I've had times that things were presented and I violated my own beliefs. I never thought that I might do that. But then, afterwards I thought, okay, I'll never do that again. Haven't. And, you learn from it and you pick yourself up and go on. But I'm of the belief, and this is why I said that, I'm of the belief, given the right circumstances and the right amount of pressure, right amount of stress, any person is capable of any act. See? So you can tell I'm not really a humanist. But I'm not a Freudian because I don't think that every person in this group here is not trustworthy. I mean, would I leave my wallet in here with y'all and walk out? Yeah. Yeah, because I may have it violated, but I trust y'all. See? And I think good of people, but there are people in this world that are not trustworthy. So, personally, I'm not a humanist. Criticisms. Concepts such as self-actualization are difficult to define. Absolutely. Absolutely. Concepts such as self-actualization. How do you know you've reached your fullest potential? How do you know you've become all you can be? What's the cutoff point? How do you define it? It's vague. And my becoming all I can be is different than each one of y'all. And so here, you sit there and you say, well, I'm just not sure what that really means. And that's one of the criticisms. Another criticism, a lot of their assumptions and a lot of humanistic thought is not, has not been research based like it should be. And then concepts are vague. Okay? Concepts are vague. Now, in talking about humanistic therapy, we're going to be using Carl Rogers as the model. Now, I'm starting to incorporate a lot of stuff about therapy into our lecture. This is one of the chapters later on in the book, and I think that while we're on the subject, we might as well just go ahead and talk about it, get it out of the way, and instead of testing you on it for points against you, I'm going to be opening up a therapy folder. If you want to take the test, it's extra credit. Anything that you get right will be bonus points. Anything that you get wrong will not count against you. And so, you can take the test. Hopefully, you'll get a bunch of points. But that's one way that you can get some extra points. Humanistic therapy was developed as a response to the less personal, more clinical therapies. Carl Rogers once said, "It is the client who knows what hurts, what direction to go, what problems are crucial, what experiences are deeply buried." It began to occur to me that unless I had a need to demonstrate my own cleverness and my own learning, I would do better to rely upon the client for the direction of movement and progress. So he's saying here that instead of me saying, I know what your problem is, I need to listen to you, and that you will tell me what needs to be corrected in your life, and you will do the fixing. That it's just some areas that you have been taught that either you lack the proper skills in making decisions in that area, or you lack the confidence. Well, I'll get into that in a minute. Carl Rogers was a Freudian therapist. Oh my goodness, listen to that. Almost all of these people that we've been talking about were originally trained as Freudian therapists. Ellis was trained as a Freudian therapist. Here we go, Carl Rogers. So, Rogers was trained as a Freudian therapist, and when he got out in the real world, he said, you know something, I don't think I like this. And he was not pleased with the treatment of the clients and the environment of the sessions. So in about the 40s, and he was one of the big people involved in creating the humanistic movement, okay? Going back to the philosophical part and the spiritual part, he brought it over to the psychology area. So he came along, and about the 1940s, he developed a new type of therapy called non-directive therapy. Now, he said, folks, we've been off the beam. It is the therapists that are keeping people sick. It's the therapists, it's the clinicians, it's the psychiatrists that are keeping people mentally ill. We do this one way by just the language we use. And so he said, we've got to quit talking about them and calling them patients. Patients means somebody's sick. We've got to quit telling them, that they have to come to the hospital to get fixed, to get cured, to get treated. There's another clinical word, treated. And so he said, we have all these clinical words that we just throw out all the time to these patients, and he started calling them clients. And he said, I think that if we would start changing some of our clinical vocabulary, it would have a positive effect on clients. Well, he started this new therapy, and several years later, he said, okay, we've got client-centered therapy, and he improved the vocabulary a little bit more. And then in the 70s, he changed the name to person-centered therapy. And he said, folks, I was wrong. He said, I said that instead of calling them patients, we need to call them clients. Instead of coming to the hospital, they need to come to the office or to the clinic. Instead of getting treatment, they're going to come in for sessions. All that's too clinical. He said, I was wrong. Even those words are too clinical. And so instead of seeing clients, we're seeing people. Instead of mentally ill, they just got problems. Instead of coming to a clinic, they're going to come to the office. Instead of having a session, they have appointments. And he said, we need to declinicalize, or whatever you want to call it, the vocabulary. Now, I think I told you that several times there are people who have made such incredible contributions to psychology, we name something after them. It's an honor. It's a form of respect. And so, non-directive therapy is the same as client-centered therapy, is the same as person-centered therapy. But many clinicians will call Rogers therapy, this person-centered therapy, Rogerian. And so if you hear of Rogerian therapy, it's the same as person-centered therapy. And PCT is what we're calling it now. Okay? Well, what does PCT involve? Well, there's Rogers right there. Well, before I tell you what you do in person-centered therapy, let me give you an idea of what the therapist does not do. The therapist does not give advice. The therapist does not make suggestions. The therapist does not interpret what has just been said or analyze the person. The therapist does not teach the individual, nor does the therapist make diagnoses, run tests, and does not direct the session. The client the person directs the session. Okay? So, with that being said, are there any questions about this? Yeah.
So basically, the person basically gives themselves therapy, like
You say the person basically,
gives themselves therapy, like instead of the therapist.
you've got it almost nailed. The person comes in, you know, I love it when I have students say, well, what does the therapist do? The therapist listens. And the therapist reflects. Now, reflecting is not the same as being a parent. If somebody comes in and says, well, you know, I'm really, really angry because I can't find a parking space at school. Parroting would be, well, you're really, really angry because you couldn't find a parking space at school. See, that's parroting. Reflecting is when you take what they say, you chew it up, think about it for a second, rephrase it, and give it right back to them. And when I say give it right back, I mean you tell them the exact same thing that they have just said, but you do it in a way that's not recognizable. I had a client one time, and this can be very effective. I had a client that was a therapist hopper. And, you know, she come in, well, you know, I went to this therapist for such and such a time. Didn't help me a bit, so I just showed him, I just left. And so I was trying all these different types of therapy on her, and nothing was working, and I could tell she was getting very, very angry at me and very frustrated and about ready to bolt on me. So one day she came in and she verbalized what was on her mind, and I reflected. And all I did was just tell her exactly what she said in a different form, and she said, you got it. You got it. You're the first one who has understood me. Now somebody understands where I'm coming from. And all I did was just reflect. All I did was take what she said, reworded it, rephrased it, and gave it right back to her. And she thought, wow, I'd had an epiphany that helped her. The therapist supports the client, provides a little structure in the session. Now, I skipped this. This is a Rogers quote. The goal of Rogers was to say, well, it's kind of summed up in this: how can I provide a relationship in which this person may use for his own personal growth? How can I provide an environment that is going to foster growth by these individuals? Well, instead of viewing people as flawed, as having problems, as mentally ill, PCT functions on the principle that each person has the capacity and the desire for personal growth and change. So instead of saying this is a bad part of a person's life, you focus on positive things, okay? And you go on the principle that each person has the capacity to change and the capacity to grow. The job of the therapist is to help their client to overcome the negative influences of authority, to overcome the negative influences of society or abusers, and to get back on track to making their own healthy choices, which would support their growth. With loving care support, people would be able to fix themselves. That's one of the things about humanistic psychology. The goal is to help them to learn how to fix themselves. Roger said there's 6 factors for growth. You have to have the therapist-client contact. How can you have growth if you don't have the 2 people working on it together? You know, if you have a client that sits in the room and says, "Oh, I really wish I could grow," and doesn't work with a therapist, you know, you can't move on. Client incongruence or vulnerability. Therapist congruence and genuineness. Therapist unconditional positive regard. I'm going to go all through this in a minute. Therapist empathy and the client perception. All right. Now, basically what we're saying is, for therapy to work, you have to have an environment that's non-judgmental, that the therapist has empathy, that there's positive regard, and basically what that means is that, well, I'll get to that in a second. Positive regard and genuineness in the environment. Okay. One of the really, really big, major parts of humanism is that it's called conditions of worth. I've got 5 minutes. I tell you what, let's stop here and we'll start up next Tuesday with this, and we can wrap up humanism.